We are so excited, broadcasting from the back of this fabulous vehicle whose brand shall not be mentioned. I'm not hijacked in the back of a vehicle. I'm here by choice today whilst on the road to run a workshop tomorrow. But here we are on Consultervation, back with Kevin Turnbull. Kevin, hello, sir.
Hi, Dave. Is that a Range Rover, by the way?
What's that?
Is that a Range Rover, by the way?
Well, it's like James Corden singing in the car, isn't it? Anyway, in a moment, I'm going to have to work out how to use a speaker, I think. But anyway, we have a special guest with us today. I hope the ticker is about right. Kev, what do you think?
Oh, I think very special.
Yeah.
Where is Kurt? I got to have a talk with Kurt.
He did say you're a nice guy. I wasn't so sure about it. So anyway, so Vince, tell us a little bit about your story. Who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do?
So born and bred in the beautiful sunny state of Florida. Got into the accounting profession kind of through family ties, so to speak, right? My mother was a shareholder in the firm. I really couldn't figure anything else to do in college, and it looked like fun. So got my master's degree in taxation, joined the firm, and then from there, it's just been, I think because of my personality of always wanting to make change, always wanting to disrupt the status quo, we just started growing, acquiring, and over the last, I don't want to say how many years because that ages me a little bit, but we've gone from a 3-person firm to 50 people, 4 locations, multi-state, and we're still looking for expansion and growth. And then throughout the years, there's been other business ventures. So I think, Dave, I own a motorsports company. So we teach people how to drive exotic sports cars, which is a really fun business venture.
Yeah.
And then there's a few other just smaller companies that kind of couple along with the accounting firm.
Wow. So did you always know what you wanted to be?
I really do think it was probably somewhere the last year of high school, in all honesty, that I actually stopped and saw what my mother was doing. I really liked numbers. I liked engaging people. And it just seemed like a logical choice for me to head into that route. So I think probably my last couple of semesters of high school, I had pretty much figured out that it was going to be an accounting and tax track.
Wow. And how did you, I know Kevin was going to ask you this, how did you end up in a track business?
So I bought my first Acura, or for those of you across the pond, Honda NSX in, I want to say it was 1997. And as I was pulling the car into my driveway, the neighbor comes running across the street and says, "Hey, my boss has one of those. You got to meet him. He's a really great guy." And so I happened to call up this individual. We went and met for dinner. We hit it off. We became great friends. And about 30 days later, he calls me up and says, "Hey, how would you like to go rent a racetrack?" And I'm like, "That's a great idea. We have no idea what we're doing, no idea how to pull this off." And so we called the Sebring racetrack, which is the home of the big 24-hour, the 12-hour race. And they at that point said, we only rent to businesses. And so we're like, well, we're a business. And they asked the name, and we said Chen Motorsports. And so literally within like 10 minutes, I was online filing all the legal documentation and, all the corporate paperwork to make it a legit business. But that was kind of how it started. And that was 21 years ago. And now that company is the largest track organization in the United States. So it's, it's grown from this little bitty hobby business to, that has, I think, 8 full-time managers in it, and it's doing well.
So that's an amazing story. So how today is going to work to make it a bit spicy, I'm going to pull up a question and Kevin's going to ask it, and we're going to test run that in a second, Kev. And then, Kev, you can go as deep as you like with Vince in terms of what the answer is. So, Kevin, are you ready for the first one?
Yeah. Okay, Vince. What makes your mindset? Because you have got a unique mindset, I think, which is something about juggling balls in the air and being an innovator. So what makes you tick? What makes your mindset?
Yeah, it's funny. We had this conversation last night at dinner. I met with two other PASBA members, some buddies of mine from down south, and they asked almost this very question. And my lovely wife of 30 years was there beside me. And I think she termed it as "you're wired uniquely," which really meant I think I'm a strange bird.
Yeah.
So I'm not what we would consider the traditional CPA. I think my mindset or what drives me is I'm never happy with status quo. I'm never happy with, with what we're doing or the process that we're doing today. I think there's always a better mousetrap to be built. And so I'm trying to find that process. I'm trying to find that system to make things easier, better, faster.
Right. Do you know, Vince, if I can just come in there, I don't come across many people like you, because what you just said is that you embrace change. In fact, you seek change. And most managers that I come across, most leaders, they're scared of change. They like the status quo. They like it to be the way it always was. If something disrupts the business like COVID, they want it to go back to the way it was. And you're really unique in the sense that you look for new things to come out of that adversity. How
I
do you
think
do it?
I think a lot of people are there. There's a fear of failure, and to me, I've always viewed failure as a learning opportunity, right? If I repeat it and I make the same mistake twice, well, okay, that's bad on me. But to try something and have it not work, that doesn't mean that that process failed. It just means that we have to adapt and we have to change and maybe modify a little bit of it. So I'm not afraid at all to take a risk. I'm not afraid to kind of put my neck out there, and if it doesn't work, it's okay. We just kind of go back to the drawing board, and we're ready to make the change again, or make a change to see if we can make it work. If you guys are familiar with the DISC assessment, the personality assessment, so most tax and accounting managers, most managers are generally very high in the S, which is the stable personality trait, which is they don't like change. So, most accounting managers score, I think we just lost Dave. Most accounting managers score high up in that, high 80s, 90s, or 100.
Yep.
I think the last time I took the DISC, I am a 3, and I think that was a gracious number. I think they gave that to me because I got my name right on the test. So I truly am that kind of agent of disruption in the office, but it is what keeps us pushing forward.
But it does make you quite a unique accountant, I think, because you're right. The accountants that I come across, they are in the kind of stable introvert, kind of psychodynamic, and you are not. And I think that's all credit to you that you use that as a way of shaping your business and shaping your life. And I think it's great. I love talking to you, Vince. I don't think I've ever told you that before, but I love talking to you.
Well, thank you.
So how do you find time for it all?
That was also a question last night, because the other two managers were trying to figure out how I did it. I think part of what I do is I don't overanalyze. Once again, I'm a pretty heavy risk taker for the most part. So I don't have to formulate a plan, overanalyze it, review it, rewrite it. We come up with something, I execute. And so I don't waste a lot of time in formulating and analytics and that whole analysis paralysis. I don't typically deal with. I'll make the decision right or wrong, and if it's wrong, then we'll correct it. So that to me, I think enables me to get a lot done. in a short period of time because I don't spend a lot of that analytical time behind it.
But what you're actually saying is that you trust your gut, you trust
Yes,
your instinct. Yeah?
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I actually think that is, as leaders grow older, the good leaders, the excellent leaders stand out because they have that trait. They don't need the over-analysis. They can say, yes, this is good.
It can get us in trouble. Every now and again, we make a decision that maybe isn't the best decision. But as long as you're willing to jump in, own it, make the correction, move forward, and I think not shy away from making the next decision. I think that's where a lot of people make a bad decision. They sit back and go, oh, I'm going to have to really think about this next one because I made a bad decision, last week. I don't want to be in that position this week. Where me, it's more of like, okay, I made a bad decision. Chalk that up to experience. Won't do that again. Let's just move forward and continue to tackle the next objective.
Right, but it kind of goes back to that fear of failure, doesn't it? If you fail once and you've already got a fear of failure, you're going to have a triple, fear of failure for the next decision you have to make. But actually, You've got to put them behind you, and I think that's great. So here's another of Dave's lowball questions. How do you fuel yourself? What do you feed on as a leader and a professional?
I am driven by my team. I love people. I love to see things working to make their lives better, easier, simpler, faster. So for me, I'm definitely not the guy that can work remote. Just so you guys know, that does not bode well with my personality. I want that contact. I want to hear how things are going. I want to hear that this is the best place to work. And so I really do. My fuel comes from them.
Right. That's a great way of looking at it. There's many things that prompt from that, but the thing that I'd ask is that how do you keep that kind of attitude going when you're transitioning from a small business of a handful of people to an organization now over 4 offices with over 50 people in and different businesses on the outside? How do you keep that going?
Hence the struggle that I think we are having right now because they haven't perfected cloning. And I'm always afraid that if you guys saw the Michael Keaton movie Multiplicity, I'm always afraid that I'll be the 4th clone, which was the not so great clone. Right now it is training people, training the team to try to take some of the jobs off of me that I think can be either they're repeatable projects or someone maybe is better suited at the execution than I might be, so that I can continue to drive forward, but not necessarily drive and execute. Right. And that's we're I don't want to say we're stuck on that right now, but we are definitely taking people on the bus and we are playing musical chairs, trying to find right now who is best seated to be my right hand.
Right. Good. Important to get that sorted out. I mean, they do say, Vince, that when you have an organization with 50 plus people, the dynamic becomes really different because you don't know them all personally. That's the key watershed in a leader's kind of career. When you lead an organization it's simply impossible to know everybody.
And that's one of the challenges I am having personally, because I do know my team. I know their kids' names. I know about, a lot of their personal life. And so not being able to engage as heavily, that also is part of my kind of fuel suck, right? That's part of the fuel for me, is getting to know them and having that relationship that's a little different than, just the thanks for showing up to work, here's your paycheck. So we are struggling a bit with that as we've grown, but we do have a couple of ideas we've tossed around over the last couple of weeks, and how maybe bringing in these 1 or 2 extra, maybe like a chief operations officer, to help take some of the some of the production related communication with the team, maybe take that stuff off of my plate so I can still do the feel good portion.
Right. I used to run a business unit with 1,500 staff reporting to me, and I always wanted one of those guys that you see on films that are behind the king or the queen, kind of saying, "It's Bob. He's got 2 daughters, and his mum's not been very well." You're whispering in his ear. I always wanted one of those.
So, Kevin, I'd like to ask Vince a very specific question before we come back to this question that's on the screen. And that is, the question is, what do you no longer do that your younger self once did? And I've got a banner as a clue. Not that I'm saying you've ever done this. What do you do less of that your younger self used to do?
So about 4 years ago, my team told me that I needed to hire this guy from Scotland because I was driving my high S disc personality type people crazy. Because yes, my younger self would literally make change just to make change because I could. And yes, it absolutely drove the tax and accounting managers. It drove them insane, as Dave can attest to. So now we do have a framework. I have a framework that I have to kind of live within. I am still able to make changes, but now the changes are, everything is driven by the culture. Everything is driven by the why of the firm. Why are we in existence? Why do we do what we do? So I think my path is much more focused than, I think before it was like shotgun to a dartboard, where, you're like, hey, I hit the 20, I hit the 6, I hit the 4. Okay. It might hit a bullseye if I'm lucky.
Yeah.
Where now it's much more focused on, hey, we're going for that center ring. We know exactly what the firm is after. We know exactly why the firm is in existence, and I can still make a difference. I can still have my personality and execute change, but it's much more focused change.
And I really like the fact you reference the framework, but I also like the fact that you've learned with us about, I was talking to Kurt about it earlier this week when we were recording his chapter from the book rewrite, about evolution is daily and revolution is the future. And what came out of the conversation is quite an interesting question. And I think you've got quite good in this next question too, which is, what's the future revolution you desire that you can start as a simple evolution today? And this is the prerequisite, Kev, is we're getting rid of the word change. And we're taking the anxiety out of the arena, and we're actually allowing people to work their way through it. So let's come back to another question. Now then, let's have a look. Kev, are you ready for the next one, Kev? So wait for it a second.
Okay, this is a why question. Well, this is a many question. It's about belief, though, isn't it? Do you believe, Vince, in what you're about from the inside out? So how deep is your passion to be who you are?
I think at our level in the firm, our level of leadership, if we aren't sure who we are and we don't believe in what we do, people are going to detect you as a fake and a fraud very quickly. Yeah. So if you're not sincere, a long time ago, one of my first jobs, I had that boss that said hi to everybody and wanted to give you a hug, but you could tell it was that forced, they just said hi to you because they knew they had to be civil, but they really didn't care about you. And you can detect that immediately. So for me, where I am, if I don't believe who I am, what I'm doing, it's hard for me to then get up and say, this is what we're going to do, or this is the progress, don't call it change. This is the progress that we're going to make. So yes, I wholeheartedly believe in the direction that we are going. I wholeheartedly believe in the team. And if it's somebody that you don't believe in, then it's probably the wrong person on the wrong bus.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, Dave and I come across this all the time, where people don't really believe in what they say they believe in. I have a client a lovely, very experienced guy, came from a big multinational running a not-for-profit in LA, but he was very thin-skinned. And I spent an awful lot of time talking to him about the way he comes across in the organization, because people detect that thin-skinnedness as a weakness, because basically he couldn't take criticism, justified or not. And the non-justified criticism, people kind of go, what? Why? What was it? Why was his reaction like that? And what you do counts within an organization. And many a time when I've been talking about a problem internally, I specifically address the issue of the team's confidence in the leadership. That if you don't solve this problem, you can have a problem with yourself being a leader.
Yeah. Well, I think, Dave, Kevin, I don't know if you're aware of this, but we acquired another firm out of state a couple of months ago. And so, one of the promises that we made that team was, I am much more active. I am much more involved in the practice than the prior owner. And that has become, to the team that's there, that has become very clear over the last 4 or 5 months. I mean, things like, it's funny, the responses I get, they're like, wow, you answered my team's message within like 30 seconds. It would have been 5 days before the prior owner, answered the message. And I'm like, I told you guys, this is, we believe in this structure, this format. And part of that is me being involved in it.
Right. I think I've coached one of the members of that team.
I think you have.
I think I have.
So, Vince, do you compare yourself to others, and if so, who?
Man, so I am super competitive to a fault in most cases. So I don't think I necessarily compare myself to others, but I am always setting that bar and trying to break that bar. I gave up trying to compare myself to this Scottish guy that's been out biking me for the last year and a half. But, outside of that, no, I really don't think I do compare myself to others, but I do have a really high bar or a high threshold set for me. And I'm just constantly trying to break that goal.
Right. I'm curious, Vince. You're to me, you are an important player in your industry and in business in general. What do you think of your position as a kind of thought leader or opinion leader? And do you take to it easily?
I actually think that's one of the hardest things that I've had to adjust to, is going from, starting in the industry as a production related person where you could just produce work, move on. You didn't have to, you didn't have to take problems home, or you didn't really have to find solutions. And now, especially for our industry, I do think that over the last couple of years, we have made, we've actually made some significant increases in efficiencies. We've made or created some products that I think are going to be game changing for the learning of new hire employees. And that part, I think, Kevin, that, I had to have my time, my creativity time. And that, I think, has been the hardest part for me to find that. Where am I best? Because I don't disconnect well. I'm not the guy that goes on vacations and can just sit on the beach and do nothing. To me, going on vacation, sitting on the beach with a laptop and being creative that's relaxing to me. I actually get to see something. There's a product that develops out of that refresh time. So I think over the last couple of years, that was a very hard lesson to learn to become that thought leader or progress into that realm. And Dave, I mean, I will, I'm going to pat you on the back for this. I think you guys helped me transition from where I was to being a little more of that leader role. And it's still, man, it's still a work in progress, because I got to admit, this is the one thing I'm probably not that great at. And I have to constantly train myself to be a better leader.
So I'm going to ask you another question. That's a really good answer to Kevin's question. And I'd like us to look to the future a little bit. I think we're living in a time where we need new leadership, not necessarily for today, but in the future. And tomorrow's kids are going to show us how to do it, without a doubt. But in the meantime, you started a track business from an idea with a guy with a car, and that's extraordinary. Your firm is growing. What's your go-to number one bit of advice for a young entrepreneur who's looking to get an idea off the ground, or maybe just feels like they don't have a clue? What would you tell them?
Wow. For that, I think I've got to go back about 30 years, because I don't think it's ever changed. When I first entered this profession, I can remember my employer, one of the nicest guys in the world, set me down and said, "The world's yours if you work hard enough." And that has always stuck. His lessons, because at that time I was a high school kid working at a gas station, and he told me, be the best gas station attendant that you can ever be. When you get to your next job, be the best that you can be. Learn everything that you can learn, and then try to make adjustments and improvements. And I think that's always stuck. So my number one bit of advice is, work hard, be the best that you can at what you are. It doesn't come easy. It's not handed to you. You've got to work to make your company or your business successful.
Right. Do you think that, just thinking about the whole kind of millennial, boomer, Gen Z debates, do you think the younger generations kind of embrace that? Because it's very much a kind of baby boomer type, classical kind of work ethic answer. And I'm with you 120%, by the way. But do you think the millennials and Gen Zs kind of embrace that?
We have hired pretty much every age group at this point. I have multiple generations in this office. So we have Gen Z all the way to traditionals. And I think it's the person, not the generation.
Right.
Because I have baby boomers and Gen Xers who in the past have not been great leaders or great team members. And I have a couple of Gen Zs and millennials right now that are some of the best team players and I'll call it company people that we've ever had. But I think somewhere that's ingrained in them that this is what they have to do. They're not, they do want, I think this new generation does want a different work-life balance than maybe what we did 30 years ago. When I first joined this profession, we worked, and my wife reminded me this last night when we were at dinner. She's like, the first 10 years I never saw you. I literally went to work at 7. I came home by midnight during tax season. We were in at Saturday for the same time frame. Sunday after church, you went in and you worked till 10. So you worked 80, 85-hour work weeks because that was all you knew. And when we adopted our first child, she kind of drew that line in the sand and said, I'm not going to be a single parent. You got to figure this out. And so that was kind of the start for me to say, man, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so we fired half of our accounting clients at that point that were not profitable or were just not fun to deal with. And we literally rebuilt the firm in 2001. And within 18 months, we were bigger than we were before we fired the clients. But we were starting to build the firm in a manner that made sense for me to actually have a life outside. So I think all of those sacrifices that we made in the early years, you can talk to any team member on my offices. We don't work those crazy hours during tax season. I don't want them working those hours during tax season, right? I want them home with their family, enjoy that, enjoy that home life. Now, when you're here, I want you to work, right? Yeah. You're here. I want you to put in 40 hours. But outside of that, go play, have fun, enjoy both sides of your life so that there is some decent balance. And I think from the Gen Zs and the Millennials, I do believe that we just have to play a little bit more onto their side of they've seen their parents working the 80-hour work weeks and hit retirement and die within a year, and they don't want to follow those steps. So they want to live life while they're pushing through. And I think we have to adapt the way that we think and the way our business works, or our model works, to accommodate that.
It's interesting because our youngest son the other day said, I don't want to be a slave to a big organization. But he's also quite happy to wrap his head around a cause, whatever that cause is. And I think the mutual ground from him saying that as a 20-year-old to what you've described today is accepting there's a different way, isn't there, Vince? There's a different way. And we just got to be open to figuring out what it might be. And it might change every year. But if we get it right, because you made me think about, you don't go to the gym to have a coffee till after the workout, hopefully. Not necessarily go there just to watch the football, although many people do. So it's that reality check that, how do you teach them to go at the level your business needs and at the same time make that agreement, not exchange, Kevin, isn't it? It's no longer an exchange. It's an agreement between you that both sides are committed to both parts of people's lives.
But going back, I'm sorry, Kevin. So going back to Kevin, something you said earlier, most managers don't like change, right? Most leaders don't like change. And so if they're not willing to look at where their practice or where their business is today and make those adjustments, right? Stop thinking Sally, same as last year, right? Stop thinking that the way we've always done it is the only way to do it. Look for other possibilities. I think there's a great workforce out there. There's Gen Zs and Millennials that are great team members. You just have to alter, our concept of how a business model functions.
Right. I think there were wise words you said a minute ago, Vince, that look at the individual as an individual, not as a generational member.
100%.
Because they have individually they've got different views of things, and I think that's really interesting. Good perspective.
So a great conversation this week on Consultervation with the fabulous Vince Howard from Howard and Hodges, and the track business to die for, but no dying is taking place in this description. And also all-round nice guy, according to Kurt Rigoff, which will, of course, I'm sure be investigated next week at the Nashville conference that Vince may or may not be going to. Anyway, either way, let me just say, Vince, loved the conversation. Thank you for your insights, my friend, and your time.
Thank you guys for having me.
Kevin, Mr. Turnbull, always good to have you as the VP of our consult and, of course, RLC President of LA, RLC, and all the other things that you get to do in your diverse life, sir.
Well, it's always a pleasure to be here. And I did actually have one question for Vince, which you may, Dave, have a view on this, but you may not. And that is, Vince, I come from an automotive background. I worked for Ford and Nissan and Mercedes in my checkered career. And you mentioned Acura to begin with, that you had an NSX. There was Honda over here. Yes. Why do you think the luxury brands of Nissan, the Infiniti, and the Honda, the Acura, why did they fail in Europe or never even got launched in many respects?
I think it was just the North American market that, right, Honda at that time, right? Think about the early to mid 80s. The way the United States or North America viewed Honda was that little bubble Honda Civic, right? It was a economical, throwaway, cheap car. And so when they came out with their, with their flagship sports car, they came out with the NSX, which was going to have a sticker price at that time of, $70,000, $80,000. Who in their right mind was going to pay $70,000 or $80,000 for a Honda?
But it was as good as a Ferrari, though.
Absolutely. Actually, it was the first modern sports car that was reliable. You could literally take it to the racetrack, drive it all day long on the racetrack, and then take your wife out to dinner that evening in it. And it was a Honda through and through. I think it was only it was our market because of the perception of the brand, where in Europe, you had Honda, you had Nissan, you had these brands were known for other than just the Honda Civic. It was not just that little bitty inexpensive disposable vehicle.
Yeah. I think also in Europe, BMW, Mercedes, and Audi had a much bigger profile over here, so there already were luxury cars.
Correct.
Whereas they all came into the US almost at the same time as the premier brands of the Japanese companies came in. And so there was more of an equal playing field. But thank you for that. I'm interested in your thoughts on anything automotive.
No, that was a great question, Kevin. And I think Vince and you handled it superbly. So if you've been watching Consultervation or listening to this episode today, we've been talking to Vince Howard, who's told us lots of great things, ranging from his story to how well he's liked, to what he focuses on and how he prioritizes his people in his business, no matter what happens. What we do know is that he's got a unique mindset of finding out with curiosity whether you can do things. And he spends all of his effort on ignoring the T and deleting it, Kevin, doesn't he, in most things he attempts to do. The one thing, Vince, as we close the show, I think I'd like to let listeners know that you still do, and I hope for years to come you'll still do, and that is this. You never lose the need to learn, and you learn as many times as you can. And I think I admire that in you. And I think it's probably going to be the thing that's going to continue your journey growing and all the things that are going on. Because that's the one thing people often forget at your stage in business, that the learning has to carry on. Because the moment you think you've reached any type of pinnacle, the only option left on the table is, of course, erosion, which can then become terminal. So good effort on the learning front. And once again, chaps, thank you for your time as part of Consultervation. I've been Dave Evans. Every success with your learning.